What's the INFJ wall, and do you ever hit it? Stick around for today's show to find out. If you're anything like me, you probably jump into a new interest or skill or some kind of exploration with great vigor and learn everything that you can about it. You may even try it out per se and get it down pat pretty quickly and then just continue adding to your knowledge. You do this by reading books, talking to other experts, watching videos. You might listen to podcasts. There are all kinds of ways to get information about that new topic that interests you. And you can do this for quite some time. You may be able to do it for a year. You might be able to do it for a couple of years. But after a while, usually at about 2 years, that's the time that it hits me, you come to a point where you start to get bored with that interest or topic or that new exploration. Even though you can go to a pretty deep level and get a solid understanding, maybe begin to get some mastery of it, you get bored when that happens. You get tired of the same thing. When you aren't transforming, going through some sort of personal metamorphosis or helping other people change, or you're not learning quite at the same rate, when it starts to become second hat and you're starting to get it down, then boredom sets in. You just kind of feel indifferent and unaffected by what once had captured your interest and taken your imagination up to the point where you could spend hours on it. Now just doesn't seem to have the same effect on you. And you get to the point where you're antsy and you want to move on, you want to find something else. Even though you might have spent a lot of money and time and invested quite a bit into this skill, this interest, this side thing, or really main focus potentially that you've been working on for quite some time now. I've done this a number of different times in my life. Thinking back to when I was younger, I was really into fishing in my teens. And I read like every book that I could possibly get. And this interest probably went off and on, for again, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, because I didn't go at it quite as gung-ho, but I was reading fishing magazines and I was reading books and I was spending a lot of time looking up fishing shows and just being outside exploring fishing. But then it got to a point where I wasn't quite as interested. Now, the crazy thing about that experience is it's cycled back around, and that can be true of a lot of skills that interest us. At one point, we might drop them for a while and then come back to them later, but I just couldn't sustain the interest in the same way. With sports, I played a lot of basketball and I was really into that. I'd go outside every day after school and play for like 2 hours. And I did that for a long, long time. But when sports season rolled around, I could be into it for a while at first, but then my interest would just taper off at the end. I can say this is even true for more recent interests. In my professional career as a teacher, I was pretty gung-ho initially getting started. But again, after about a year or two, I had shot my wad and was kind of bored because it had grown old hat and I'd gained some level of mastery and the interest just wasn't there as it was before. And even as I've explored the realm of blogging, just to be completely honest, blogging and recording videos and making podcasts, it's been really exciting, particularly as I've been learning and acquiring new skills and gaining new interests. But once I get to the point where I start to master them and they become familiar and I'm doing the same thing over and over, I start to wonder, is there something else that I could explore that might be more interesting? Because it's that journey where I'm diving in and I'm starting to get my hands around the patterns and the ideas and the concepts. That's what's really exciting. But when that goes by the wayside, then my interest tends to dip. And when I see that I've explored a lot of the topics, things can kind of wane. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to be abandoning this anytime soon, but the point I'm trying to make is that we as INFJs tend to lose interest from time to time when we don't have the opportunity to grow quite as much as we did before, and we start to master certain skills. We want to continue to learn new ones and to spin those new ideas, to explore those new ideas, to investigate those new ideas. So how can we sustain interest for the long run, particularly when we've invested a lot of time, money, and energy into developing the skill or skills, and we need them for our career or to provide for ourselves or to provide for our families? I want to take a look at that because we all hit the INFJ wall, or at least a lot of the INFJs I've talked to. We get into something and we really enjoy it, but we can only do it so long before we get bored. So how do we find something that we can stick with for a long time? Let's take a look at 7 things that we can do to sustain our interest. And I'm not saying that these are the only ones, but these are some things that I've found helpful, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts as well. First things first, before you do anything else, you want to pick a topic to focus on that's really going to capture your interest. And I got to be honest, I mean, there's some personal exploration that happens throughout life. So if you're younger, maybe in your late teens or early 20s, and you're trying to figure out what it is you love and you're born to do, it's just not going to come without personal exploration. So to a certain extent, you can find things that interest you, but you have to get out there and just try some different things. And you can't really steer the car, as the analogy goes that I've shared before from Jeff Goins, until you put the key in the ignition, turn it, and then punch the gas. So you have to get out there and start taking some action before you will arrive at clarity. But when you get moving, you need to try some things. But to the best of your ability, it can be really helpful to pick a topic that captures your interest in it, and that's one that's going to sustain it. I've heard the analogy of a no-end road, that interest that you could spend 5 or more years on. This is what Jonathan Milligan of bloggingyourpassion.com recommends. If you get an interest that you can keep exploring for a long time, then it's going to allow you to stick with it. So spending some more time thinking about that one thing that really captures your interest can be a big first step. And how do you find out about that? Well, one of the best things that you can do is to look back into your life and look for patterns of things that you kept coming back to, even if only for a year or so, and then you come back to it again. Even if it's in cycles, it's not a continual interest. It's just one that maybe you did for a while and then you did for a while again. So that can be one big thing. You can also ask other people who know you well, what does it look like I'm interested in? And the feedback you get from others can be helpful, because while we think we know ourselves well, sometimes those other perspectives can be very enlightening, especially for us as INFJs, because we really appreciate different perspectives. So spend a little time thinking about the thing that you really love doing and that you could do for 5 years or more. That can be a big first step. Another thing to keep in mind is that you should prepare yourself for boredom. You should expect to get to the point where you're not as interested. I know this sounds maybe a little bit pessimistic and backward in thinking, but just anticipating what's to come can be helpful so that you're not caught off guard when it comes. One thing that really has helped me is just listening to Darren Rouse of Pro Blogger. He's an INFP, not an INFJ, but he's talked a lot about in his blogging journey how he has set out really excited learning about a particular topic. So for him, he blogs about taking photos and digital photography as well as blogging in general. And there have been repeated times in his life where he's just grown disinterested and flat. He's felt no excitement or energy for what he's doing. And it's been tough, but he's persevered through it. So he's learned that those times come, but anticipating them can help him to keep going. And honestly, just hearing from him has helped me a lot too, because now that I know I'm in this phase, I know it's not something that's weird or wrong or something that no one else experiences. So just knowing that other INFJs go through this as well can be really helpful. I heard a great quote from Dave Ramsey in his book, Entre Leadership. Actually, I read the quote. And his quote was something to the fact that anybody who sets out to say, for example, work on a health goal for a month is going to change his or her life in a significant way. It's going to be a positive result and make a positive impact in his or her life. If that person, he or she, does it for a year, it's going to make a huge difference in life. It's going to be a lifestyle change, probably going to experience some awesome results. But the people who persevere and stick at something for 10 years or more are the ones that are really going to make a huge difference and potentially change the world, which I think is something that's super appealing to us as INFJs. So knowing that those people who hang in long enough can really make a big difference is a big motivation. But hanging in that long means that we're going to go through some serious dry spells and droughts. And I think there's something to just continuing to show up, even when you don't feel like it, knowing that the positive emotions may come back, but even if they don't, you're going to keep at it and persevere. So just going in with the idea that there's going to be some down spells, there's going to be some droughts, I'm probably going to lose interest at some point, but I'm going to stick with this can help. This is true of my teaching career. I've done this for 10 years or so now. I've been teaching, and there have definitely been times, there are times every year, there's seasons where I'm not as excited, but there are certainly times when I do get new ideas, when I have a new opportunity to try something that I didn't before, like starting a podcast at school, for instance, that can kind of boost my energy and give me a new perspective. I love technology because it continues to change things up. So knowing that there's also going to be some positive seasons too, and sticking with it for the long haul can make a big difference. Third, while to a certain extent you always want to do something that you're interested in, doing something that helps other people can be helpful as well. And what I mean by this is if you know you're using your skills to make a difference in the lives of others, that's going to be motivating to you. You who are a person who loves people due to your extroverted feeling and the way your personality is wired are really going to get a lot of reward and excitement, enthusiasm out of serving others and helping them grow and change, even if you don't feel motivated at that particular time. So choosing a place where you can make a big impact on other people can be a great reward in and of itself and can help you keep going when you hit that INFJ wall. Number 4 is to have a noble goal. Sometimes we need to do things when we're not excited, when we're not motivated, when we lack the energy. And it can be really challenging to keep ourselves pushing ahead and moving forward. But when we hit those times, if we have a bigger goal, a higher purpose behind what we're doing, that can keep us going. I like what Michael Hyatt says about this. He says, people lose their way when they lose their why. It's really important to have a vision, a purpose, and a big why when you lack the energy or motivation to do something. This is helpful when you have to do tasks that you're not as excited about, but it can also be helpful when you're trying to persevere, when you hit the wall, when you find that interest that used to be really interesting, boring. So for me, my why is helping my wife stay home so that she can watch our sons. That's one of my whys. Another thing is just using my gifts in a way that serves other people. So things like that keep me going, keep me motivated. So I'd encourage you to think about big whys that are maybe bigger than your particular goals. Look behind your goals to the reasons why you're doing them. They can keep you going when you don't feel like it. And I challenge you to put those in writing because there's something about writing it down that makes it more final, makes it more serious, invests you in what you're doing, and can help you to persevere. 5, and I like this one a lot. You should keep in mind that you don't always have to do things the same way you've always done them. Even if you're dealing with the same content, approaching it with a different technique, style, or media for communicating can make a big difference. So for me, as I've started out blogging, it was fun to introduce recording a video or to learn how to podcast. I know there are other aspects of communication that I could take advantage of to vary things up, or just vary my workflow and the approach. I know we as INFJs like to think about different ways of organizing our time and our workspaces. Little changes like that can make all the difference in the world. So I'd really encourage you when you get stuck to look at new ways to introduce novelty into what you're doing. Even something as simple as shaving or changing your clothing style can make a big difference. So think outside the box and don't be afraid to mix things up a bit. And then stick with that same topic, but in a different way. A big difference maker for me is community. Being in relationships where people are going to ask me about what I'm doing and hold me accountable for my actions. Sometimes just being around people who are getting things done can encourage you to keep at it as well. I know that's the case for me being a teacher. Seeing my coworkers work keeps me working when I don't feel like working. This is why a lot of solopreneurs and people that do their own work commit to working in a co-working space because you get energy from being around other people. I don't know if you've ever gone to write a paper or to read or just to do some work in a coffee shop because of the chatter of other people around you and just being surrounded by people who are maybe working on their laptops or working on a paper or something. There's something about being in a community that can keep you going even when you don't feel like it. And you don't even have to necessarily talk to those people, but just being around other people who are working can make a big difference. So that's why I'd encourage you to get into groups, even though you're an introvert, with a few other people that you trust or even people who think differently than you that can give you other perspectives and can hold you accountable when you don't feel like moving on. Teams and other people make a huge difference when you get stuck and you hit that dry spell, when you hit that INFJ wall. Finally, and number 7, always make sure that you keep your priorities your priorities. As we go through life, we learn more about ourselves and we find out what really matters to us. Maybe something that wasn't as important before becomes even more important as we move on. So be willing to rearrange your schedule and to evaluate where the thing you're working on is in line with everything else in your life. Just because maybe it wasn't as important as it was before doesn't mean that you should jettison that interest or that skill or that thing that you've been working on altogether. But be willing to move it and maybe give it a little bit more of a backseat or to fit it into the cracks. If you're working on a side hustle or a passion or you're developing talent as a musician, whatever it is that you're working on, you can still do it. You don't have to throw it out altogether. If you're anything like me, you want to do things really well. And it can be frustrating when you feel like you don't have as much time as you did before, or like something else is the priority at the time. Give priority to your biggest, most important priorities in life, but be willing to think about new, fresh ways to fit your interests into the cracks, even when you're not as excited about it. You can keep going as long as you're thinking flexibly and you're prioritizing the most important things. Because if you try to put something that's less of a priority first, it's going to eventually not work. You're going to be frustrated and you might throw out the thing that you've been working on altogether, unless you find a new creative way to fit it into your life. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that it served you and that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn more about your INFJ personality, then I'd love to give you a free copy of my book, The INFJ Personality Guide. You can get one of those books one or two ways. First, text the letters INFJ to the number 444999, or you can visit ispeakpeople.com/INFJ-personality-guide. That link's in the description below this video. And in the book, you'll learn about the mindsets and motivations that cause you what to do, as well as some common INFJ challenges and solutions to those challenges. But ultimately, I want you to come away with the idea that you're not broken or messed up, but that you're just different and your gifts are needed in this world. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to subscribe. There'll be new videos and tips and suggestions each and every week for INFJs just like you. And if you are a subscriber already, thank you so much for being part of this community. I really appreciate you.